Glad to be here. You guys, the weather around here it is what it is, right? And we most of us have lived here long enough to figure out, you know, 90 degrees and then snow, right? So, um, super glad that you're here. Listen, I want to bring something to your attention um, before we dive into the message today. A couple things you've kind of noticed that are new. On the back of the chairs in front of you, you'll see these cards, all right? These cards are a new way for us to try to communicate with you, okay? And so there's a Get Connected card. And if you take the Get Connected card, this is where, if you're a visitor, we'd love to hear from you. How did you hear about us? That kind of thing. And if you turn the card over, there is a QR code on there that you can scan and do it electronically or digitally on your phone if you like or prefer that. And then when you fill this out, you put it in the box on the way out or just leave it on your seat and we'll collect it, right? But there's a giving envelope. If you want to give, you can use this. Also instructs you on other ways to give electronically, all that kind of stuff. At the end of the service, oftentimes I'll bring us to a point of decision, right? And I'll want us to make a decision to take a step toward Jesus or whatever. And this I have decided card helps us communicate with you, helps us know what you're thinking, what's going on for you. And so again, this would be the card you turn to if you decide to make a decision or whatever. On the back, again, you have the QR code and you can do it digitally instead of manually. And then lastly, we have the prayer card. Now, here's what you need to know. We pray for everything that's turned in. We are a church that prays for people who are sick or in the hospital or something's going on or whatever, but we need to hear from you. I can't tell you how many times I hear a week after somebody's been in the hospital because word didn't get to me and so we weren't praying like we could. God moves through prayer. And so please, 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 if there's something going on in your world that you want us to be praying about, use this card. Again, the digital version, you can scan it on the back or use the physical card and we just want to communicate with you. All right. The other is if you take out your smartphone, every once in a while I put something in your program that promotes an app called the Church Center app. Okay. And this Church Center app is an avenue for us to communicate, to get things where you can kind of follow along. You can access sermons from it. You can now, when you download it, it's free. You just download it. When you do, it'll ask you, to look for your recognition. And the first time you do it, it'll want to know a little bit about you because what it does is it connects to our database. It connects to the database our church uses and our events calendars and all the groups. If you're in a life group, all of that can be run through this app. So I highly, highly recommend those of you that are, want to use your phone for a lot of stuff. Download this Church Center app, log in. It'll ask you what church you are, find us, click on Bethel, and then it'll connect you to sync up with you. All right. And on here, I put a button for sermon notes. And if you hit the sermon note button, it'll pull up our sermon notes for today, a digital version. It's fill in the blank. You can fill in the blank just like you do manually, or you can choose to see the part that has all the blanks in case you miss a blank. And sometimes people get real, I missed the blank. What is it? Okay. And there's a way to do that. And then what's really cool and what we're trying out, there's a way that you can save this as a PDF. So you can save your notes and take them home with you and open them up at a future date or whatever. Those of you that notes is important to you, okay, that's a great feature. And then at the top, there's an interact that also allows us to put like different announcements or whatever. There's another tab for additional notes if you want to take additional notes. It's really good. The Bible is actually on here. YouVersion, click Bible, and then you can search and go through things. There's a lot of cool stuff on here. So I just want to push you in that direction. Those of you that want to use that, okay, you can use it or just use the regular notes if you want to. but I wanted to bring that to your attention, okay? So, some new stuff. We're trying to get into the 20th century, and so that's kind of what we're doing. All right. So, everybody pull out your outlines. We are starting a new series today. And here's what I know that may have happened in your home, might not have happened in your home. I don't know. But as we've been promoting this marriage series, some of you, maybe the ladies, maybe not, but one of you, possibly the ladies, kind of was like all excited, and you told your husband, "Hey, super excited. We're going to do a marriage series. It's going to be great." And your husband's response was, "Hey, that sounds great. Why don't you go take notes?" And you were like, well, why don't you want to come? Isn't that exciting for you? And here's what I need you to understand, just maybe a little bit, that to help some of the ladies, not all the way, some of the men aren't like this. Some men in this room are a little more sensitive to this kind of thing than others. I get it. But in general, guys tend to look at marriage the way ladies look at cars. Okay? And here's what I mean, right? What I mean is this: is that when you're driving in the car, and maybe your husband's driving, and you're in the car with him, and you're driving along, and all of a sudden he goes, shh, shh, shh. He turns the radio down. He goes, "Did you hear that?" And you're sitting there going, "No, I didn't hear anything. And even if I did, who cares? Turn the radio up. We won't hear it anymore, right?" I mean, what's no, shh. Hey, honey, I'm gonna pull over. You drive. I need to find out where that sound is coming from. Right? And to you, you're thinking, why do we need to know? As long as the car is driving and it's not broken on the side of the road, who cares? Just turn up the radio, keep going. Maybe, right? Right? And so for some of you need to understand that men sometimes look at marriage that way. You say to them things like, "Hey, can we talk about our relationship?" And to a lot of men, it's like, if it's not broken on the side of the road, why do we need to talk about it? Right? It just, all I care about is turn the key, push the gas, it goes, right? Let's not talk about it all, right? But the truth of the matter is this. Truth of the matter is this, guys, listen. We do need to talk about it. We need to have conversations about relationships. We need to talk about marriage and what's going on, right? Regardless of how you're feeling right now. Now, here's the other thing. If you're in the room and you're a single person, I am super, super glad that you're here, because for the next 3 weeks together, we're going to be talking about something that is not really in your world right now, but most likely you want to get married. So there's some great stuff that if you pay attention, you can put some things in your pocket. You can, kind of hold on to it later. But the fun part is that you're going to get to see all the married people in the room squirm and kind of get uncomfortable, and they're going to have homework and go home and talk about it. And you're going to be like, "Man, I'm so glad I'm not married right now. But, hey, I want to be someday." So here we go, right? So hang on with me. And here's the other thing you need to know. Today, we're beginning a series. I'm going to introduce a tension that's found in marriage. There's not going to be a lot of Bible study today. So if you're kind of the person that, you want me to dig in a lot of scriptures and all this, that's not happening today. That's going to happen next week a little bit more. There is some scripture. We do believe the Bible. It's part of it. But, and if you're here and you don't believe the Bible, then maybe this is going to be one of the greatest messages you've ever heard, because I'm not going to dive in that much in it, right? So, but here's the deal. And I want to kind of start this way and kind of lay a little bit of groundwork for us as we talk about relationships. So, here we go. Whenever we come to marriage, right? And for some of you, you got to think back a ways. For some of you, not so long ago. For some of you, it's in your future, whatever. But when we came to our current relationship, particularly when we came to marriage, we came with a box of stuff, right? And we're going to call these desires. We're going to call these hope and dreams. That when you came to a relationship, and particularly when you came to marriage, and you're about to come together and you're engaged, and your heart, your mind is filled with a bunch of, just what you dream your home is going to look like, what you dream your relationship's going to look like. And there's a lot of things, you know, like for instance, there's this dream that says, when we get married, we're gonna be able to buy this house and maybe a better than this kind of house, but we're gonna have a nice house with plenty of bedrooms and our kids, and you know what? There's gonna be some time where there's going to be some children that are going to come, and we're dreaming we're going to have children, and for you we're going to have one because you grew up with only a bunch of siblings, and some of you grew up with no siblings and you want to have a lot of kids, and some of but there's dreams about kids, and how many, and maybe we'll have one, or maybe we'll have a basketball team, I don't know. But then there's also dreams about who will do what, right? And who's going to take care of things? And when this is necessary, who's going to do that? And, there are other expectations like, what? I grew up in a home and my mom always did, or my dad always did. And so, my wife's going to do that, or my husband's going to do that for me. And then, there's the idea of, when we get married, we're going to spend all of our time together, or you know what, we're gonna split our time, and I'm gonna have my friends and he's gonna have his friends, and then they're gonna come together, or maybe we'll never let our friends meet, but there's some expectation. We're just gonna, all this time thing, we just dream about these kind of things, and for some of you, there's talk of money, and when we get married and we dream about how much money we're gonna make, and we're going to have our own business, or we're going to have our own this or that. And, and so there's these dreams and hopes. And someday I'm going to be able to drive a car that may be better than this car. And again, more expectations, more dreams and hopes. And a lot of this, and here's what you need to know, a lot of this is based on how you grew up. Well, my mom always did, or my dad did. It's things that we've seen. It's things that we've experienced, both good or bad, right? Our hopes and our dreams are based on, things that we experience that we don't want. And we're not going to be like that. We're going to be like this. Or maybe we saw it work and it was great. We want to be just like that. But we come with all these things. For guys, you come with certain dreams and ideas that say, things like, my wife's never gonna ever wear something like this. Or maybe the wife says, you know what? He just wants me to be comfortable and I can wear anything that I want. But we come into these kind of relationships with all these desires. But the problem comes is that when we take all of these hopes and dreams and desires, which are good, which are legitimate, and we walk down the aisle and we say, I do, and we walk out the back of the chapel, often what started out as hopes and dreams and just desires that we have, some very legit God-given desires, what happens is they migrate and they become expectations. And what started out as a desire, we place into this box and we hand it to our spouse. And we say, I do, here you go. I believe this is how marriage ought to be. I believe this is what, and in some ways, look, in some ways, we talk about these things. You talked about these things with your spouse, and he promised or she promised and said that if you will, then I will, and all these things become expectations. And we plop them on our spouse, and the idea is, okay, here we go. Right? But what you need to understand is we talk about this dynamic today. You need to understand that there is a big difference between having a box of desires and a box of expectations. Because a box of expectations changes the dynamic of your relationship. It changes how you view things. So we're going to look at this. Now today, the title of the message was all about the big I problem. The big I problem. And on your outline, I started with this verse in Isaiah chapter 14 because although this isn't about marriage, this is the origin, if you will, of where pride and selfishness kind of begin. This narrative in Isaiah chapter 14 is talking about the fall of Lucifer, the fall of the enemy, the Satan. Look what he says in Isaiah 14. How you have fallen from heaven, O shining star, son of the morning. You have been thrown down to the earth, you who destroyed the nations of the world. For you said to yourself, I will ascend to heaven and set my throne above God's stars. I will preside on the mountain of the gods far away in the north. I will climb to the highest heavens and be like the Most High. You read some of the other verses that I put on there for you, and you see rather quick that when you and I come into marriage, the problem with this is I. The problem with this is that when you take all of your desires, and here's the deal. Look, again, I'm going to say this over and over. They're legitimate desires. They're legitimate dreams and hopes and that. And we'll get to what we do with them. But when you and I choose to plop them on our spouse, the problem is this comes from I, capital I. I want these things. I need these things. I desire these things. And now you need to take care of this for me. And when two people come into a marriage with, and we both do, we all come with these boxes and we plop them on each other, that creates a tension in our marriage that has a tendency to erode the intimacy that's supposed to be there. Take your Bibles real quick. I don't have a slide for this one. Take your Bibles in Philippians chapter 2. Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. Paul writes and he says this, don't be selfish. That's the I problem. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too. And the problem with an iMarriage is that when I come, it's all about me. It's not that I don't think about her. It's not that I don't think about him. But the expectations are what I want, what I desire, what I need. And now I plop them on you to take care of. And we have a big problem, right? That's what we're going to talk about today. And what you need to understand in this moment is that this iMarriage, the dynamic changes because there are two big I's in the marriage, right? And once they collide, once I bring my expectations and drop them on her, and she takes her expectations and drops them on me, we have a collision of two big I's in the marriage. Problems come, and here's some solutions to the problem. When two big I's collide in a marriage, here are some of the solutions. The first is we leave. We quit. I mean, he's not doing what he's supposed to. She's not doing what she's supposed to. And it's just not working out. And he's just not a good husband. And she's just not a good wife. And she just doesn't understand. And so we quit. We leave. He's just not good enough. He's not what I signed up for, whatever. And we leave. But the problem is, when we leave, all we do is take our big box of expectations and go plop them on the next one. That's why for some of you, your second marriage feels a lot like your first marriage. Your third marriage feels a lot like your second marriage and your first marriage. Because all you're doing is walking away with a big box and plopping it on somebody else. There's another solution. We conquer. or conform, depending on how strong your personality is. You see, what we do is we go into a relationship, and one of the people in the relationship tends to be a little more dominant than the other. So you go into this partnership, and the dominant partner convinces and, I'm right, and I have the better, and I'm more logical, and I can argue better, and da-da-da-da-da. And you convince and cajole, and you do all these, you conquer. And the other partner who's not as dominant, they conform. Okay, okay. We'll do your box. Okay, just don't argue, don't fight, all right. And the problem with that is the conqueror, after convincing enough, and she acquiesces or he acquiesces, the conqueror feels good. Marriage is good. This is great. We're doing everything in my box. The world is right. But the conformer, they can do it for a little while, but it starts to break down. It starts to break down after about maybe 10 years, 10, 15 years, somewhere in the mid-30s to 40. The conformer starts to get weary, tired. Why? Because for you, it's easy to be you. It's not easy for them to be you. But in your mind, as long as they do everything the way you want it and they kind of conform to everything you say and they do, then life is good. But for them, it breaks down. And then something bad happens. One of the things I noticed in my marriage, and this is just for me, but I've noticed a pattern a little bit for me. And it runs on somewhere around a 7-year cycle. Every 7 years, I kind of notice something in my marriage that, in our relationship, the relationship with Catherine and I, and all of a sudden we'd be fighting more than we normally did and all these kind of things. And the first real eye-opener for me was after 14 years of marriage. And I will tell you that early on in our marriage, this was absolutely us. It was absolutely conquer, conform. I had the stronger personality. I could argue better. I could reason better. I mean, I could run circles around her in that regard. She would conform because my wife hates conflict. So my wife would just do everything. And I'm telling you, for the first 5 years of our marriage, I don't think we ever had an argument or a fight about anything. I thought it was great. I'm like, yes, this is perfect. We are in bliss. I'm exaggerating a little bit. There was some. But, in general, we always went where I wanted to go. We always did what I wanted to do. It was one of those kind of things. And then about year 14, something changed. My wife started kind of pushing back. She started, giving her opinions, but forcefully. And it was like, what's going on? What are you doing? What's happening? And it took some time for me to figure out. She's just been conforming this whole time. And you're an idiot. And you need to start listening. And you need to stop pushing. And this took a lot because I thought we were in bliss, but I had no idea. I had just taken my big box and put it right on top of her. And she'd been carrying it for all those years. And we had to backtrack. And maybe you're there. And maybe you've been married a long time. And maybe it's been 30 years or 40 years. And you didn't even realize it. But your box is getting awful heavy for your spouse. And it's time for you to sit back and understand what's happening. Your big I is dominating her little I, and that's not right. And there's another. This often will lead to the third option when two big I's are colliding. And the third option is compromise. We just get into a relationship where we compromise everything. And his money and my money, and his time and my time, and his friends and my friends, and and everything's just a compromise. And I'm not saying that compromise isn't part of marriage and there's always compromise, but when you get into a relationship where it's all about avoiding any bit of conflict or whatever. And so we're just going to separate and we're just going to compromise on everything. That's still just two big eyes trying to figure out how to coexist. And that's not what marriage is supposed to be. That you and I have to figure out the I problem. The problem that comes to marriage with my expectation. And I get it, because as I talk about this, that there is going to be a pushback and there is going to be, but you don't understand, Mick. We talked about this. We talked about it. And she promised. And I believe, I feel that, he promised and she promised. And I, honestly, I said I do because she said she would. And now she's changing the rules. You telling me I can't, whatever. And I do this. And I'm just telling you, you can live this way. You can live this way and you can keep going and you can compromise and you can all this kind of stuff. And there are marriages that make it through that way. But they're the marriages you and I look at from afar and we know they're not happy. We know they're just existing. We know they're just kind of, they're there. Because here's what the compromised marriage does, right? The compromise thing. You'll hear them talk about the marriage. You'll hear them talk about, I'm committed to my marriage. I'm committed to my marriage. When you and I need to understand that God never called us to be committed to the marriage. God called us to be committed to a person. And there's a difference. And when your terminology and your thought process is all about committed to the relationship or to the marriage, instead of focusing on being committed to a person, there's a problem. You're probably in a compromised marriage. But God has another solution. And you got to come back next week because we're going to talk about that solution next week. For just a few minutes, I want to talk about this tension. I want to talk about what this does to your relationship with your spouse. Because what happens is this, is that when you and I choose to migrate our many legitimate God-given desires, hopes, and dreams, when we allow them to migrate into expectations, what happens is you devolve your relationship to a debt-debtor relationship. Because what expectations say is, you owe me. You owe me this. You promised. You said. And my father always, and my mother did, and this is how, and we talked about this, and you promised, so you owe me. And when our relationship devolves into a you owe me and I owe you, so you better do what you're supposed to and I'll do what I'm supposed to, and as long as we do that back and forth, we'll be happy. But the moment you don't, there's a problem because you owe me. But here's what you need to know. Here's the crux of today. So in case you got to go to sleep or whatever, here's what you need to know. In a debt-debtor relationship, we set the bar at the expectations. And what that does is when there is a bar that your spouse is constantly trying to reach, because that's what the expectation, that was what we agreed to, when there is no room for the reception of love. There's no room for love. Why? Because if they reach the expectation, if they reach the bar, do they get credit for that? No. That's what they're supposed to do. When your spouse does what you expect, are you showering them with gratitude? No, that's what they're supposed to do. Isn't that what a wife does? Isn't that what a husband does? I mean, that's just zero. They did what they were supposed to do. Now we're all zero. Everything's zeroed out now. But when you allow things to stay in this category, when you are able to migrate things back into a desire category, now when your spouse meets a dream or a desire you have, a hope or a dream that you've always had, and they fulfill the dream, what happens? You shower them with gratitude, right? That when we take these things out of expectations, we open up the opportunity for us to receive and give love. That's the difference. So long as we are here and everything is a you owe me and I owe you and you better and I don't and you do, then we will never have that opportunity to express or receive love the way God intended in a marriage. You know, one of the things that we have in our home, okay, so again, it's just me and I use us as an example because it's the only marriage I have to give you an example of. And our marriage isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. We're coming up on 28 years, got 9 children, all that kind of stuff. But we've had our bumps and we've had our bruises and we've had our, and in our home, okay, we have a very traditional style marriage and roles and responsibilities. My wife, for most of our marriage, has been a stay-at-home mom. We've got 9 kids. She stayed home with the kids every time we had kids. There were times when she worked part-time and as a nurse and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, when I was getting ready to get married, when I was looking for someone to marry and starting, my dream was to marry a woman who would love to mother my children and nurture my children at home. And so in my mind, my desire, my dream was to have a stay-at-home mom. That I didn't want to marry someone who wanted to be an executive or wanted a career in that way. That doesn't mean that's for everybody. That was just for me. But that was a dream. That was a hope and a desire that I had. But I have to be careful because in my situation, in my home, it is easy for me to take this and drop it over here and go, well, I work all day, so here's some expectations for you, honey. You're home all day. You should be doing this, and you should be, you know, and when I get home, you know, and whatever, and, you know, and it's easy for me to delve into that. And when that happens, and Zoe has a messy diaper, it is easy for me to sit there and go, well, she'll get that. That's what moms do. That's her role. She'll take care of that. Right? And when she does, I'm not going, good job, Mom. Thanks for doing that. That's just what she's supposed to do, right? I mean, that's what wives do. That's what stay-at-home moms do. And she gets 0 credit. And I can't tell you how many times I have found myself having to back the train up a bit and look at things. Because here's the deal. Here's the deal. Look, and you know this. When this is how we operate, we don't get credit for doing what's supposed. It's why you're never going to get a specially packaged, perfumed letter from your mortgage company because you paid your mortgage. Right? You're not going to get that. You're not going to open up this letter from the mortgage company that says, oh, dear Michael Martin, thank you so much. We appreciate you paying your mortgage, and we appreciate your wife, Catherine, and all your many children. By the way, have you had any more children? Because we want to know, and we want to send you a gift card because you're such a valued customer, and you're paying your mortgage. Wait, that doesn't happen. But do you know when you hear from your mortgage company? You know when you're going to get a letter from your mortgage company? When you don't pay your mortgage. In fact, if you don't pay your mortgage enough, they will call you on the phone. Not a computer. A real live person will call you on the phone to talk to you about it. Now, if you try to call them, man, you're going to get lost in phone hell forever, right? But if you do something wrong, ooh, they give you personal attention, don't they? And the same is true with your spouse. You see, because, if they're just doing, you won't notice anything until it's out of place. Right? For me, and I'm giving you some of my dysfunction, right? For me, I like to come home to nice, neat, orderly home, right? I hate coming home to chaos. And so my wife, she knows that. And with all the kids running around, she'll do her best to make sure the house is clean or whatever, And there are times it's not, I get it. But so I'll walk in, and do you think I notice when, things are nice? No, that's just what she's supposed to do. But if I walk into a mess, oh, honey, come here. Come here. Catherine, look at this. Get down here. It's hard to see. You see this right here, Kath? Can't be this way, right? Kids, come here. Michael will attest. This can't, we can't have this. Daddy can't have this, right? Oh, yes, sir, Daddy. You see, they don't feel loved. They don't feel appreciated in that moment. All they feel is that my expectations haven't been met. And that's how we treat each other. And that's what happens when your legitimate desires and hopes and dreams migrate to expectations and we plop them on our spouse. And our expectation is they do this because they promise. And when they don't, boy, we let them have it. And here's the deal. The goal is to learn how to migrate these back into here. Now, here's not the goal, okay? The goal isn't to just get rid of it all. That's unreasonable, right? Again, a lot of these are legitimate dreams and hopes. The goal isn't just get rid of it and we're just going to have a vanilla life and I don't have any hopes and dreams. I don't care and whatever happens. That's not the goal. The goal is not to get rid of it. The goal is to keep it in the category of desires and hopes. And give your spouse the opportunity to, number one, he or she has to know what's in your box. You got to figure that out, right? But keep it in this category so that when they meet a desire, right? One of the things that I do to try to remind me of this, again, in my situation, I don't do a lot of the cooking at home. I love to cook, but I don't do a lot of cooking. Catherine usually does a lot of the cooking. Just one of the things that I've tried to do to try to force me to keep things over here is that after every meal, and we eat meals together almost every night as a family, we do that. That's a priority of ours. I kiss my wife after every meal. I just make sure that I do that. And I kiss her and I say, thank you. Thank you for making dinner tonight. Right? Because far too many times, I will tell you, again, the expectation is she makes it. The only time I say something about it is when it's not right. She burned it. She didn't make it right. Da, da, da. And, I find myself doing that. And it's just wrong. Because I've allowed things to migrate. And the goal is for us to get it out of this category and put it back here. So that when they do, we can appreciate it. So here's just a couple things on your outline. A couple things to help you see if this has happened. Okay? There are two ways for you to know if things have migrated from this point to this point. How do you know? Two things. Here they are. It's gratitude, right? Gratitude and acts of service. Expressions of gratitude and acts of service. Expressions of gratitude. When was the last time that you thanked your husband or thanked your wife for doing something that you would probably say that's just what they do, right? I mean, you know. When was the last time you thanked her or thanked him? He's the father of your children. When was the last time, ladies, you went to your husband and said, honey, I just want you to know how much I appreciate how you take care of us and how you do this or whatever they do? When was the last time you expressed gratitude for something that they've done, for going to work and coming home? There are so many marriages and situations out there where the husband doesn't come home or the wife doesn't come home. And if he's coming home or she's coming home, you need to be grateful. But he's always late. And I have dinner ready, or we got schedules and we're supposed to, and he's never on time. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Look, you can be here if you want. You can live that way in your marriage if you want. But how much better for you to migrate it back to this category and be grateful. Be grateful when he prays with your kids or tucks them in or whatever. Be grateful when she goes above and beyond. The other day on Friday, before the rain came in on Saturday, my wife went outside and did a bunch of raking. And I was just blown away. She was our yard needed leaves, you know, and it was just, she did it. And I was grateful, and I said thank you for that. And then I went out and helped. But because I allowed it and kept it here, and it wasn't an expectation, there was an opportunity to express gratitude. When was the last time there were spontaneous expressions of gratitude for something your wife or your husband has done? And I'm not talking about the spectacular stuff. Oh, he brought me a dozen roses, so I said thank you. No. I'm talking about the day in and day out stuff. And then acts of service. Acts of service. It's stuff like when you see something that he or she normally does and it needs to be done, do you sit there and go, oh, he'll get that. He'll get that. That's what he does. That's what she does. I'll let her take care of it. You find yourself kind of seeing it needs to be done and just going, she'll take care of it. And walking away, that's a problem. You see, because when you were dating and you couldn't get enough of each other, do you remember what that felt like when you were constantly serving each other and helping each other and doing everything you could for each other just because you were in love? That's what this is supposed to be. And so, expressions of gratitude, acts of service. And here's what I want you to imagine, and we're done today. Imagine a marriage where everything, all your hopes and dreams and desires were in this category. And you didn't have any expectation. That you kept them here. That made room for the relationship to be what it's supposed to be. Just imagine what a marriage could look like. And then I want you to answer a question. When you leave today, the ushers at the entrances have a card for you. And on one side of the card is this question at the bottom of your outline. It says this: what does your spouse owe you? And you got to be honest. Okay? You got to be honest. Now, listen. This is not the message that you should go out and talk to your spouse about today and have a big long lunch and let's talk. No. Don't do that. Don't do that. There's a lot of thinking that you need to do individually. But answer the question, what does your spouse owe you. And then on the back side of the card, there's some verses that I want you to meditate on. You can memorize. Let God kind of to spur you up a little bit through these verses as you ask this question. What does your spouse owe you? And where we're going next week, here's what I'm going to leave you with, is this. Here's what happy couples know. Happy couples know that they owe each other everything, but don't expect anything in return. Happy couples, couples who are content and fulfilled in their marriages, they understand that they owe each other everything, but they don't expect anything in return. Next week, we're going to look at a passage from the Apostle Paul to help us understand this dynamic a little bit more. You got a little bit of homework. Come back next week. We'll talk about the solution. Let's bow our heads and close our eyes. Father God in heaven, we come before you and we ask that you would help us in this moment, especially those in the room that are married or those thinking about getting married. God, I pray that you would help us to understand if our desires and hopes and dreams have migrated into expectations, if our relationship has devolved into a debt-debtor relationship. God, I pray that you would help us to understand what that means, that we would begin to migrate things back into desires, that we would begin to show expressions of gratitude like never before, acts of service for each other like never before. Because that's what marriage is supposed to be. Our eyes have gotten in the way. And we need to work together. Help us with this, God. Guide us in Jesus' name. Amen.